Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. My name is Debbie McNeil, and I am president of the League of Women Voters Edina. Welcome to the Candidate Forum for State Representative for House District 49B. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan volunteer organization that encourages citizens to participate in government. While we as a league do studies and take stands on issues, we do not endorse or support political parties or candidates. The views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates, not those of the League of Women Voters. And the sponsorship of this forum is not an endorsement by the sponsor of any candidate. I would now like to introduce our moderator for this forum, Alice Moorman of the League of Women Voters, Minneapolis. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Before we get started, I'd like to ask everyone to get out your cell phone, and now please turn it off. Thank you. The purpose of this evening's forum is to provide an opportunity to hear the candidates discuss issues that are important to you. We will try to cover as many issues as possible in the time we have. If your questions are not answered tonight, feel free to contact the candidates directly. All candidates who filed for office and who will be on the November 6th ballot were invited to this forum. I'd now like to explain the rules and format of tonight's forum. Candidates have drawn numbers to determine speaking order. Speaking order will rotate with each question. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to make an opening statement and 2 minutes to answer a question sent out in advance. Candidates will then have 1 minute to answer each question submitted by the audience. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to make a closing statement at the end of the forum. A league volunteer will time candidate responses and indicate to candidates when they have 1 minute remaining, 30 seconds remaining, and when they must stop. And the timers are right in front of you there. Audience questions must be in writing and handed to a volunteer who is wearing a league button. The moderator, that's me, will ask all the questions. The League of Women Voters of Edina determines which questions will be asked and attempts in good faith to cover the topics of interest indicated by the questions submitted from the audience. All written questions become the property of the League of Women Voters of Edina. This forum is being videotaped. Please hold your applause until the end of the forum. I would like to introduce you to your candidates for Minnesota House of Representative District 49B, Paul Rosenthal and Terry Jacobson. And those are the order when they drew as to who will start. And so, Paul, would you like to make your opening statement, please?
Sure. First, thank you to the League. I really appreciate the opportunity. I care deeply about this community, our kids, and our state. Our kids are our future. Providing a first-class education to all Minnesotans must be priority number one for me. Stable and adequate funding for schools, colleges, universities are essential. We can't go on squeezing education. If elected to the House, I'll be a strong voice for Minnesota kids. Our communities are critical. We have to do everything we can to expand jobs and foster a vibrant economy. In addition to responsible stewardship of the environment, if elected to the House, I will work hard on these issues. Our state desperately needs leadership and vision. The state budget forecast factors in inflation on the revenue side, but not on the expenditure side. In addition, the legislature has indulged in shifts, gimmicks, if you will, that kick the can down the road. The budget tricks have to stop now. It's time. Individual legislators need to cut the ideological grandstanding and find common ground. That's what I did when I served in the legislature. If elected again, that's what I'll do. Last but not least, we need a higher standard of conduct in the legislature, regardless of political affiliation. If somebody does something wrong, they should resign. And one more thing, don't send the taxpayers the bill for your bad behavior. Here in Minnesota, we have much to be proud of, but we have to do better. That's why I'm running for the Minnesota House of Representatives.
Thank you. Terry?
Hi, I'm Terry Jacobson, and I am running for state representative in 49B, and I just wanted to say thank you to the League for hosting this wonderful event and giving us the opportunity to talk about the issues and to ask questions. My focus during my campaign has been on the economy and making sure that we can grow our economy through the private sector. I believe that growth must come from the private sector, and that the focus on that is directly, or that can be directly affected by the legislature. With policy and tax issues that we will be facing, I think that we will be able to change the business climate. And what I mean by that is I think we have to focus on being more business friendly here in Minnesota, and that will fix a whole host of problems that we're facing. One being our budget. I know that we all have been talking about the budget issues here and that we are facing deficits, although now we've come around to having some surplus dollars, so that's pretty exciting. Part of that is because we focused on revenue growth through the private sector and changing those regulatory environments and changing the tax structure. The other pieces that we want to worry or focus on in our next session would be the education piece. I have a background in education. I used to be a high school math teacher, so I understand what it is like to be in the classroom. And I think focusing in on those things that teachers need, returning some control to the local level for schools is what we need to focus in on, and make sure that those teachers and principals and those schools have the tools that they need to do the job of the big job of educating our children. So that's the focus of my campaign: the economy, spending, and then education.
Thank you. I will direct the first question to Paul, and it's a question that was previously sent out in advance to the candidates, but I'll repeat it. What specific measure would you support to reduce the state budget deficit and to repay the money owed to the school districts?
Thank you. The current budget deficit, projected deficit, is $2 billion, actually. $1 billion projected, and then another billion in interest, which they don't add into the equation. Then if you throw in the school shift for school shift on school districts, that's another $2.4 billion. So the current legislature didn't balance the budget. They kicked the can down the road again, and we're going to end up with a $4 billion deficit in 2013. And this whole strategy of kicking the can down the road, and it's been going on for 10 years. It's not just recent. It's duct tape and mirrors, and we want to stop that. We want a transparent government. We want to make sure that the legislature is going to work for us. This last session, in my mind, was one of the worst in this state's history. They shut down the state government, which caused havoc. They laid off 19,000 people. They closed, which made other businesses close, made vacationers cancel their vacations, and what did they achieve? Nothing, because we have the same budget deficit now that we did when they started. And so, in my mind, there's several things we could do. After looking at all the cuts, I will look for cuts wherever I can, and before I consider revenue. But in my gut, I do think we're going to need revenue. And there's some interesting options out there. There's this tax on internet sales, which will bring in about $300 million a biennium. And if you push that out to magazines and other outstate sales, we can bring in another $300 million. So I'm willing to work for
You can
to
finish your
balance the
sentence.
budget, but it's going to be balanced. We'll look for cuts first, and then we'll look for revenue.
Thank you. Terry, do I need to repeat the question, or?
No, this one I know.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. So, well, I think that, first of all, I do believe that we are facing a bit of a surplus now, and what that will fade. That's actually current, so we have collected more revenue than expected. And so with that, and that's not exactly, that was partially because we've had an increase in the economy and we've had some better tax collection, so more people are working. And so that part is very exciting, and to project that out, I think what we need to do is focus in on keeping that current budget just the way that it is. If we can hold that static, I think that we can meet those needs then with this increased revenue that's projected. And so the way that that shift actually gets paid back, that there is a rule of how that works. And anytime that there is extra revenue collected, it goes first to the cash account, and then it actually goes to the reserve account until that is funded. And then it goes right away to pay back the shift. So I think that with a focus then on increasing that revenue through more private sector activity, we will then be able to have surpluses there if we are able to keep that budget intact in the way that we've already passed it. So we may not even need to look at cuts, although I do believe that that's the first best option. But then I think that we should focus then on building the economy and making sure that that revenue is increased through the private sector. And I think that that will take care of itself then.
So, thank you. Next, we'll have questions from the audience, and you each will have a minute to respond to them. And the first one, we'll start with Terry. What is your position on the proposed constitutional amendments, and what are the reasons?
My positions on them? For the marriage amendment, my position is that I'm happy that the voters get to vote on this, and I think that we will have a voice then here from Minnesota. I am a citizen as well as a candidate, and so I will be voting on that. But I do think that after we have seen, after the vote, after the outcome of that, that we will actually have more dialogue. So we will either, depending on how that turns out, the outcome, we'll either have more dialogue or we'll have continued dialogue, I believe. And so my position then on that is that I don't think that it's an event that's over yet. And in terms of the voter ID, I'm happy that that is out there for us to vote on. I do believe that we need to have voter integrity, but I think that since we could not get that passed, that it's good to have that for the people to vote on.
Thank you. Do I need to repeat the question?
No, I think I got this one. First of all, I think putting constitutional amendments on the ballot is bad public policy in general. The legislature should be able to work it out. To the amendments specifically, the one on gay marriage, I don't want to see discrimination put into our Constitution. Our Constitution gives us rights, it doesn't take them away. And so I'll be voting no on that amendment. I also will be voting no on the photo ID amendment. If it's really a bill that's not even finished, it's halfway done. And what it does, it restricts people's access to voting. That's their first right, is the right to vote, and that should never be taken away. And it will disenfranchise 250 to 500,000 Minnesotans. The elderly, the poor, the handicapped who can least afford it, college students who don't go to state colleges, active duty military. It's a problem. It's a problem we don't have, and it's an expensive solution.
Thank you. We'll start with Paul this time. What specifically would you do to work across the aisle with the opposing party to get something accomplished?
I think this is critical because the current gridlock is getting us nowhere. When I was in the House, I made a conscious effort to meet with as many members of the other side as I could. And what surprised me was we agreed on about 90% of the issues. And the 10% where we didn't agree, if we both would just give in a little bit and walk away feeling like we didn't get everything we wanted, that was probably a good bill and a better bill and had a better chance of not passing, of passing. The fringe benefit of that was when I was a chief author of the bill, almost 90% of my bills had Republican co-authors, and I tried to co-author as many bills of theirs as I could, and that dropped the partisanship. It became Paul and John and Julie and Ann instead of Democrat-Republican, Democrat-Republican, which I think is killing us. And like Ron said, most of the action does not take place sitting in your desk. You got to really work at working with the other side, and it's vital that we do this next session.
Yeah. Terry?
Well, I had read recently some Minnesota history, and in 1857, when we ratified our Constitution, we actually had to have two parties in separate rooms in order to do that. They each ratified their own. So this isn't a new problem, but we actually have probably gotten better because we can sit in the same room now. So that's probably good. But I do think, what?
I agree with that.
I do think that we that is an issue that we do need to work on a daily basis. And I do think that it has been said that it's hard to hate up close. And so getting to know each other and getting to understand what the issues are and that we're working together to fix is always a good idea. But I think that we need to focus on problem solving. And so I think when people say they want us to compromise, what they really want is just some problems solved. And they want them solved in a way that is beneficial to our state. And I think that's the bigger issue here, is how to think through and how to problem solve in a creative way where both people can walk out of a meeting and feel like they've gotten a win. So that's a win-win type of situation. That would be my goal.
Yeah. We'll start with Terry, with you for this question. Will you support development of a state-based health insurance exchange rather than waiting for the federal government to act?
Well, I think that that depends on the type of insurance exchange that I have envisioned. So I have envisioned a very free market healthcare exchange type of entity. And so the one that is a single payer system that I think that the federal government would implement would not match what would be the best for Minnesota. So faced with those two decisions, I think making sure that we have a very, very free market focused health care exchange would be the best way for Minnesota. We already do an amazing job right now of covering health care here. There's only about 6% of the people that are uninsured, and part of those, they're uninsurable. So Minnesota is actually they should actually be held up as the example for other states. And so my fear then is that that would be something that would be compromised if we are unable or not able to put one in place and have to use the federal model. So that's a big concern.
Paul?
First of all, it's not a single payer system. This is giving private insurance companies more business. Let's be clear. I support the system. Minnesota is in the forefront on getting the exchanges ready to go. In my view, the more people that are covered, the less expensive it is for all of us in the end, because healthcare costs come down. Is it a perfect bill? No. It does some really great things, and I'm talking about the Affordable Care Act. It makes people with preconditioning conditions insurable, which they aren't right now. The purpose is to bring down costs, and the more people that are more people that are covered and can go to the doctor and receive preventative care, that saves us a ton of money, because they don't wait and then go to the emergency room, where emergent care is much, much more expensive. So yes, I'm supportive of them. Is it perfect? No. Can we work to make them better? Yes, and we should.
And we'll start with you, Paul. In your view, what should the next legislature do to promote more jobs in Minnesota?
Well, the first thing I was just really disappointed in this last session was the bonding bill. The governor wanted $1 billion in bonding. Money has never been cheaper, and hopefully will never be this cheap again. But we should have been bonding to the max and fixing our infrastructure, our roads, our schools, our transportation systems, our sewers. And that instantly puts people back to work. But we also have to look at the private sector and what they can do. And, these public-private partnerships, I think, are a great example. The University of Minnesota spins off a lot of these small companies in their infancy, whether it be nanotech, biotech, all kinds of tech that are way above my head. And, we need to support those and nurture those and make sure that they have the investment that they need to go forward, and I need to stop.
Terry?
Well, I think that government needs to get out of the way in order to grow jobs in this economy. I believe that the private sector is the engine that grows jobs. And so part of that, I believe that we need to make sure that our state is business-friendly, and then not only that, but we have to be competitive with the states around us, because we are in a global race for jobs, not only globally, I guess, but nationally as well. And the states around us have lower corporate income tax, they have less regulation, and they have less barrier to entry for businesses than Minnesota. So that does not help Minnesotans. Additionally, then, if you look at the tax, corporate tax rate and all of the taxes put together with property tax, corporate tax rate, we are 45 out of 50. So I don't know if you had a classroom if your kid was in a classroom and they came home and said that they were 45 out of 50, you might not be very happy with that. And I'm not happy with the fact that we're 45 out of 50 in terms of the ability to grow jobs here, the ability to have private sector industry, startups, and current corporations expand and thrive here in this state. We need to work on that.
Thank you. And you get to start.
Great.
Please describe the role of the state in transportation. What role does public transit play?
Well, I think that what we have for Minnesota and for the state and what the role is for government, that's a big question all the time in all sorts of areas. But in terms of transportation, we need to use the monies in the most effective way, and that means that we have a common good. So for us, then, what kind of maximum return can we get on the dollars that we have? And there's always going to be unlimited need, but there will always be limited resources. And so if you think about what we have here, then, is the roads do an excellent job of providing a mode of, or a way to transport with cars and trucks and people and goods. And so that part is always something that we're going to have to take care of. So the state is charged with that. That's what the state's role is to I certainly can't make a road, so I need the state to do that. And I'm willing to pay taxes to do that. But in terms of then buses and other types of transportation, we need to make sure that that's effective and that it's efficient. So we have some areas for improvement, especially in the light rail area.
Could you repeat the question? I was still back on the last one. I have a couple comments to say about
I'd
it.
be happy to repeat the question. Please describe the role of the state in transportation. What role does public transit play?
Okay, first of all, I just want to go back for a minute. Terry is wrong about the business climate in Minnesota. Ernst & Young, after all the deductions and taken out of corporate taxes and income taxes, ranks us number 10. Forbes magazine in 2011 ranks us number 11. So, we do have a pretty good business climate here. Can we do better? Yes. Should we? Probably. But it's certainly, we're doing well. That's why we have more Fortune 500 companies here than anywhere in the country. And yes, I believe government has a large role to play in transportation in all modes, whether it be roads, bus rapid transit, light rail. The more easily we can get people to and from their jobs and the goods to and from market, and the less strain we have on our families and travel time, the better it is. So I think it is a role that the government plays a role, and it's one that the private sector wants us to play, because they can't do it themselves.
Thank you. Paul, you get to start on this one. What specific legislative actions will be necessary to respond to the demographic changes in the state's population, and specifically the rapid aging of our population?
That's a very good question, and if you ever get a chance to watch the Tom and Tom show, that's Tom Stinson and Tom Gillespie, our former state demographer. He runs through this pretty well. It is clear that we are aging and that it's going to be a challenge to take care of our aging parents and friends with a generation that is smaller. So that's a big challenge, and I don't have all the answers for it, but it's going to include private and public partnerships, it's going to include families, and it's going to include all of us pitching in to make the best of a bad situation.
Shall I repeat it?
Yeah.
What specific legislative actions will be necessary to respond to the demographic changes in the state's population, specifically the aging of the population?
Well, I think that going back to the jobs creation piece, we are actually, our corporate tax rate is 9.8%. South Dakota's is 0. So part of that aging population here would be best served by making sure that we have several types of generations here, that families can stay here. So when you have children and grandchildren, that they can be here and they can help take care of you. And that would mean that this state would have to attract younger people and keep younger people here. And the way that it will do that is to make sure that it's providing a strong economy, excellent jobs, and excellent opportunity. And so states like South Dakota right now are booming because their corporate tax rate is 0, and ours is 9.8%. We are not competitive with the states around us. We are losing business to other states. Texas and Florida, they have income rates at 0. People are moving there at an alarming rate. They are leaving our state. That will not help the elderly that are here. We need younger people here, and we need families to stay here, and we need jobs here in Minnesota.
Thank you. And we'll start with you, Terry. Which should come first, evaluating current government levels or setting the budget?
Oh, you had that one last time. I saw that one. So I think that we need, currently right now, I believe that we set the budget first and then worry about how to pay for it. And I think the opposite needs to be true. We need to make sure that we have a clear understanding of the revenues, the tax collections, actually, that will be that will be coming in, and understand that those are dollars that are from individuals working. Those are hard-earned dollars, and they get paid into the state. And I think that we need to set our budget then according to those dollars. And so that means that we're going to have to prioritize, and that we're going to have to make decisions on exactly what the role of government is, because not all the time should we go back to the taxpayers and ask for more money. We need to make sure that our state is spending in a way that is responsible and respectful of the people that pay the revenue to the state.
Thank you. Paul? Do I need to repeat the question?
Sure, why not?
Which should come first, evaluating current government levels or setting the budget?
It's become pretty difficult to evaluate current budget levels when we've been on a yo-yo for the past 10 years, and we're not sure what's going to happen from year to year. So I think we look at the need that's out there, and I would go for budgeting first, and then see what's left over, what we can pay for, and if there's duplicative services or services that aren't working, we need to trim them. But we need to start from a strong position. This state has always been known for a great educated workforce, infrastructure that's second to none, and that's what businesses are looking for. They're looking for communities where people want to live, and so we'll start with the budget. And hopefully, if Terry is right and we have all this extra money in the next biennium, great, we'll have great budgets.
Thank you. And you get to start with this one, okay? Arctic ice on Sunday reached the lowest level ever. If elected, what would you do to address our changing climate and to encourage bipartisan collaboration in solving this problem?
I personally believe climate change is real, and it's happening around us every day. Look at our weather over this last couple of years. We've had the driest, hottest summer we've had since I've been here. I've been here for 21 years. And so I would look for ways to further reduce carbon emissions, especially in coal. And we'd look for alternative energies. A friend of mine is off the grid now. He is 100% solar powered. He's got a Nissan Leaf, and I'm jealous of him, to be honest. But it is going to take a collaborative effort to figure out what sources of energy we're going to use going forward, what is the most healthy for our environment and for ourselves and for our kids and their grandkids. And that's an issue that we need to talk about, and we need to talk about it in a bipartisan way.
You want to repeat that, please? Sure.
Arctic ice on Sunday reached the lowest level ever. If elected, what would you do to address our changing climate and to encourage bipartisan collaboration in solving this problem?
Well, I think in Minnesota we have some different options here, and I know that certain types of energy, different types of energy work better than some. And so I think what we need to do is always focus on the market and what the market will bear. And so if there is a big demand for solar, then that's a wonderful option. If there's a big demand for wind, then that's a wonderful option. But I think what we have to be careful with, and we have to make sure that we're not getting into picking winners and losers and subsidizing energy because there's not an option, or there's not a demand for it. So the government, I think, should wait for that demand, and as soon as the consumer is ready to do that, then we can move forward. I think that Minnesota will take care of it. I don't necessarily think that that's a role for government to play.
You can start with the next question. I think I know what it means, so. The question is, and if not, maybe it can be clarified by whoever wrote it. What is your position with respect to state vouchers? I assume it applies to education, correct? Yes?
I was a teacher at Benilde St. Margaret's, and that's a private Catholic high school. And in the classroom at Benilde, I was able to teach and be very nimble. And the education there is excellent. And the kids that graduated from that high school, almost all of them get into very good colleges. And they do very well on their SAT and ACT test. And so the role of vouchers, I think, is crucial for parents who don't have the opportunity and don't have the means to pay for that type of education, but who may be locked into a school system where it's failing them. And so we don't have time to wait for our education system to figure it out, because kids are graduating every single year. They are going through the system, and we're not necessarily fixing it or changing it. So until we can actually get a handle on that, I think we owe it to children and to parents to open up those options, whether that be charter schools or vouchers. And we need to do it quickly, because we're losing out. These kids don't wait. They continue to go through the system.
I think public tax dollars should go to public schools. I have 2 sons in the Edina school system, and we've had nothing but great experiences. And something such as vouchers just takes money away from the people who need it the most, like inner city kids, like Minneapolis and St. Paul school districts, where the achievement gap is tremendous. And how do we get those kids ready to learn by the time they are ready to enter kindergarten? That's the crucial question to ask, and that's about early childhood education and making sure they have the tools and the resources to enter kindergarten ready to learn. That takes the whole stress off the K through 12 system and on up through the justice system. So to me, vouchers no, public schools yes. I have 4 nieces that went through public school. 2 are at Yale, 1 is at Brown, and 1 is at Carleton. So, you know, public schools do work, and if you want to go to private school, I think that's great, but the taxpayer shouldn't pay for it.
This is another education question. Do you support state or local district policies on anti-bullying?
That's Paul first.
It's you
Me?
first.
No. I would support both, actually. I think school districts probably have the best handle on what's going on in the school day to day, and they should be able to make some decisions right there that will take effect immediately. I think the state has a role in providing a guideline for bullying that if it's not met, you know, the school will then have to do better, and the school district will have to do better. Bullying is a real problem. There was a film made by an Edina school student that was just shown at the theater on 50th in France, about his experience with school bullying. So it does exist everywhere. It exists in Edina, it exists in Bloomington, Minnetonka, Eden Prairie, Minneapolis, St. Paul. It's a real problem, and we should attack it in all ways that we have available to us.
I actually agree with Paul. on that one. Although I think that it should be more at the local level. The schools should be the main decider on how they're going to handle those types of situations and be able to implement policy along with parents, input from parents, and then clear discussion with parents too, because that is part of the issue. So the parents and the schools would be the first line of defense on all of those types of. Every school has a different culture. So bullying in one school could be quickly or immediately changed through maybe a culture change that may not be able to, we might not be able to regulate that at the state level. But sometimes there is a guideline for that, but I do actually believe that we should keep out of that as much as possible so that the schools can handle it on an individual basis, and that they should do that. That is definitely something that they need to be handling.
Another education question, and we'll start with Terry. What do you see the role of public education from both pre-K through post-secondary in producing an educated electorate and a skilled workforce?
Well, we're charged with that. I think as a state, that's part of the role of the state, is to have a public education system. But we also have to make sure that it's effective and efficient and that it's actually doing the job that it's doing. And I think that we've seen that it hasn't in some cases. There are a lot of schools that are doing a great job. And if you live in a city that you're able to have access to that, then that's wonderful. And your children have an advantage. But not all schools are performing at that level. And so we need to make sure that teachers have the tools that they need in order to do that, and that principals have the tools that they need in order to run their schools. But then additionally, while we're waiting, like I'd mentioned before, while we're waiting for those things to turn around, we can have some options for parents, because those children don't wait. They actually go through the system. So when a child has different needs, I think that we have to pay attention to that. And if a school is failing a child, then then we need to make sure that that child has some different options. But for the most part, I think Minnesota does an excellent job.
Paul?
Yeah, I kind of look at education as a whole, E through post-secondary. The E through K, early childhood through 12 portion is huge. We have not kept up with inflation. Investing in our schools in the past has always meant higher wages for all Minnesotans. If you look back over history, the more we invest in education, the more we bring home, and I think that's a good thing. As far as our colleges and universities, we've been failing them. Last session, they had the most dramatic cuts ever, and students are graduating with huge amounts of debt with a BA and a BS. The state used to pay for 60% of their tuition. Today, we're down to 18 to 20%. That's a huge amount of money to put on the backs of school children, of college children and their families.
I'm going to follow up with another question that I wasn't going to ask.
Great.
But it's just, you didn't answer this. And so what are your solutions, suggested solutions to lowering this post-secondary education costs, the student debt? And we'll start with you, Paul.
Well, I think we need to invest in our universities. Whereas our land-grant university, and we can't keep using it as a way to balance the budget. The U spits out hundreds and hundreds of little corporations every year, whether, as I said this earlier, whether it's biotech, nanotech, some other kind of tech that it hasn't even been thought of yet. And we need to make sure that those businesses grow in coordination with the schools, so the schools get a part of that revenue. And, it's the best investment we can make. Employers want an educated workforce. That's number one. We want jobs. We need to educate people to the best of our ability.
Well, I think one thing that will lower the cost of current education at that secondary ed would, and that was part of the question, right? Was that secondary education?
Right.
Okay.
Right. Just the whole.
Is that
yeah.
we've gotten a new technology, and part of that is online college, and there's also for-profit schools now that do offer a lot of different options for learners. So you can actually go to work and you can learn online, or you can attend a different type of institution. So I like the idea of having a more market-driven options, because I think that will reduce the overall cost. If colleges have to compete for students, then they will have to drop their prices. And so, for instance, I take an online class right now for an MBA program that is actually in West Virginia, and that is $300 per credit, because there's so many options out there. It's actually driven that price down. And then to understand that there are those types of options for kids, they don't have to always be brick and mortar institutions, will help, again, those other costs.
This is our last question, and then you'll have a chance for your wrap-up. And we'll start with Terry. Do you support the construction of the Southwest Light Rail? Yes or no? Yes, and why?
Oh, yes
no
or no?
why?
Okay. I can actually answer with a sentence. The Southwest Light Rail, it's unfortunate that this is the one it's on the docket now, because we've had some other light rail options that have not necessarily been fruitful in terms of cost. So they are highly subsidized, and the ridership has been a little bit of a disappointment. And so I think that it's more difficult to get on board with this last project, which may be, and it probably could have been a good fit. In terms of cost, though, and ongoing costs, so the initial $125 million in order to build it, if that is truly, if that's the amount that they'll be needing after overruns, et cetera, is a big dollar amount. And then also ongoing, the fares don't actually cover, the individual fares paid don't cover the ridership costs. And so that is an issue, I think, that we have to seriously consider. So again, there's always going to be unlimited need, but there'll be limited revenue. Would we be better off spending those types of dollars in other areas of transportation? So at this point, I do not support that project. I have not seen the numbers work.
Paul?
I support this project 100%. It's a 90-10 match with the federal government. It is really needed. I don't know how many of you sit on 62 like I do for hours at a time, starting around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and you can't go anywhere. United Healthcare is building their biggest campus in Eden Prairie. 6,000 new workers are going to be located there. That's great, but getting them to and from work in the most efficient way is something that we need to be conscious of. And, you know, we should look at all forms of transportation, cars, buses, especially buses, rapid transit. But the light rail gets the most people to the most places, the fastest and the quickest, and will hopefully relieve some of the congestion on the roads at the same time.
And now the closing remarks, and we'll do it in reverse order. So Terry, you can be first. You have 2 minutes.
Okay. 2 minutes is kind of a long time for closing remarks. Thank you all for coming here. I'm happy to have been part of it, and I appreciate the support, and I appreciate the attendance, taking time out of your evening. I know it's you could be doing so many other things. And thank you, Paul, for coming, because if you hadn't shown up, I wouldn't be here either. So, so I appreciate that as well. And I just wanted to say that for us, I think that we need to really focus in on our future. And I think that we need to make sure that we're leaving our children in a very good situation where we're not piling on debt, where we have been thoughtful and thorough with what we're planning. And I think that we need to make sure that we have the resources, knowing that we will be having an aging population, to continue on with that type of level of spending that we have now. So we want to make sure that the projects that we've got, we will be able to keep them, or understand that that tax collection could be reduced because of the population that we have, that we will be considering in the future. So I think that we need to be very prudent, and I think that we need to be very thoughtful with all of our spending, and I think that starts at the state level. Then we have to make sure that at the federal level we're doing the same thing. So for me, my focus and the reason that I am running is making sure that our spending is within the that we spend within our means, and then additionally that we are focused on growing our state, and that we want to make sure that growth must come through the private sector. That is the engine that drives our economy. And then additionally, I want to make sure that we are positioned for our children, meaning that we make sure that our education system is strong and efficient and effective, and that our children are being educated, all of them are being educated in a way that they will be able to provide for themselves. Because we will need them here as we all age. We want to make sure that we set them up for success. And so that's it?
That's
Okay.
it, that's it.
Cut me off.
I'm pretty sure my son's not going to take care of me when I'm old. But, you know, this state has always been great. It's been great because it's been forward-looking, and it's always had progressive values and values that we share as a community. And I really take this job seriously. I not only represent Edina and Bloomington and Minnetonka and Eden Prairie, I represent the state as well. And I'm very conscious of that. And while we may be doing well here, let me tell you, outstate is not the same. Property taxes have risen over 100% in some cases over the last 10 years. And people, especially seniors living on fixed incomes, can't afford to stay in their homes. So we have to, this is a make or break year. We have to decide what kind of Minnesota we want to have. Do we want to have a Minnesota where we embrace everybody and try and give people a leg up? Or do we just want to stay in our bubble and watch the rest of the state fall apart? In my mind, we do better when the rest of the state does better. And right now, the rest of the state is hurting. They're losing teachers, firefighters, policemen, and elderly people are getting thrown out of their homes because of this no new tax pledge, which just gets transferred to local governments and cities and school districts. And I think that's wrong. Anybody asks me to sign anything saying I absolutely will not do this, I stay away from, because there's a hidden agenda there. Our agenda should be to do what's best for all Minnesotans, help the economy grow, educate our students, and make sure that we have the kind of community where we want to live. And that's why I moved here 21 years ago. That's why I'm raising my kids here. And that's why I think we have a lot of good days ahead of us, but a lot of hard work as well.
Thank you. That concludes our forum for this evening. I would like to thank the candidates for participating and for their willingness to participate in the democratic process by running for office. Thank you to the League of Women Voters of Edina for sponsoring the forum. This forum has been taped for broadcast on Edina Community Channel 16 and will be shown Sundays at 11 p.m. and Mondays at 7 a.m. and 3 p.m. until Election Day. The forum will also be available for viewing on the internet through the City of Edina, www.edinamn.gov. For more information on voting and the candidates, please visit League of Women Voters Minnesota's election website at www.vote411.org. Thank you for attending tonight's forum. Please remember to vote November 6th. Good evening.